We are at Schloss Leopoldskron, the home of the Salzburg Global Seminar. And if you look across the lake from the Schloss, you will see a big, craggy mountain, the Untersberg. And my guest is soon to be stranded at the top of that mountain. He is taking part in the American Studies program, and the theme this year, it's an annual program, is Great American Literature. So, Paul Lauter, you are going to be stranded at the top of this mountain for a very long time with 3 books, 3 great works of American literature. That you will have to keep you company. Now, you're a professor of literature yourself.
Yes.
At Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, but you're also the editor of an anthology of American literature. What is that?
It's called the Heath Anthology of American Literature. All these anthologies have the name of their original publisher, Heath, Norton, and so forth. It was a very revisionist anthology. That is to say, before the Heath came out, many of the writers that we study regularly now were not available, and in many cases were really not known to most students, including graduate students, and to many of our colleagues. So when the Heath came out, it was part of a revolution in the study of American literature. The definition of American literature changed profoundly, and all the other anthologies have subsequently imitated us. So what gets studied now is very different from what was studied even 30 or 40 years ago. In fact, I just started teaching the survey course in American literature at Trinity, and on the first day I said, you know, to the students, you might be curious about this anthology since my name is on it. Yeah, tell us a little about it. So I did. And one of the things I did is I went through the 3rd volume. It's in 5 volumes now. I went through the table of contents of the 3rd volume, and I said, this writer or these texts would not have been in any collection 40 years ago if you'd been a student at Trinity in 1970. You would not have studied this person, and you would not have studied that person, and you would not. And I went down the table of contents, and I found it very surprising, even to me, how different it would have been 40 years ago, and more when I was in graduate school. So it's a profound change, it really is.
Why is that? What's brought about that?
Well, I think the why has to do with what brought the change about. The social movements of the 1960s brought the change about. Black people would say about courses, curriculum, and about anthologies, where are the blacks? And women then say, where are the women? Because they weren't there. You would study entirely white male writers in American literature, with the exception of Emily Dickinson, and maybe a poem about baseball by Marianne Moore.
What about American Indians?
No. You studied Indians in anthropology, and that literature? No. And that was true right across the board. In the most popular anthology, when we came out in 1979, 1980, the most popular American literature anthology was the Norton Anthology. They had some black writers, not very many. They had no Latino writers, Chicano, Puerto Rican, whatever. They had no Native American writers. They had no Asian American writers. And they had very few women. And so what we did in responding to those questions, where are the blacks, where are the women, and so forth, was to bring them into the anthology and therefore into the coursework. And the theory behind that is you bring to people's attention in a course on culture, a course on literature, the lives of people who are marginally who are excluded, who are placed on the margins. And by doing that, you bring them into attention and their lives into attention. And so that the why, how that came about, was really from the politics of the 1960s, from the civil rights movement, from the feminist movement, and so forth.
So now you have 3 books that you can take with you
Right.
to the top of the Untersberg. What's the first book you will take your mountain retreat?
Well, I should say that in thinking about this, I wanted to think about the books that felt important to me, and different kinds of books. So I didn't want to choose 3 novels. I didn't want to choose 3 collections of poetry. So I chose a collection of poetry, a collection of stories, and a novel that are very meaningful to me. So the first one I chose was Allen Ginsberg's Howl and Other Poems.
And why is that meaningful to you?
Well, first of all, Ginsberg is at once extraordinarily funny and grabs you in just fascinating ways. You know, people use the word queer now, and they usually mean by queer homosexual, and Ginsberg was queer in that sense. But he was queer in other ways that many people are, in fact. He stepped out of the mainstream of American culture and American poetry. He brought back into American culture and American poetry the kind of cadences that Whitman had a century before brought in. And he spoke to people like myself who grew up in a much more constrained, narrow world than what our students are growing up in now. Howl came out in 1956, as I recall, and it was just a revelation at that time. You know, McCarthyism, Eisenhower presidency, the gray man in the gray flannel suit, and all the rest of it. And here's Ginsberg, you know, America, I've given you all, and now I'm nothing. It's amazing, wonderful stuff. And that's just one poem, America, which I love, and which I read my students.
That, don't you?
Well, I can read a little bit of the beginning of it. America, I've given you all, and now I'm nothing. America, $2.27, January 17th, 1956. I can't stand my own mind. America, when will we end the human war? Go fuck yourself with your atom bomb. I don't feel good. Don't bother me. I won't write my poem till I'm in my right mind. America, when would you be angelic? When would you take off your clothes? When would you look at yourself through the grave? When would you be worthy of your million Trotskyites? America, why are your libraries full of tears? America, when will you send your eggs to India? I'm sick of your insane demands. When can I go into the supermarket and buy what I need with my good looks? America, after all, it is you and I who are perfect, not the next world. I mean, for a kid like, I was 1956, what was I, 20 some odd. I mean, this was like tremendous blast, peeling away all of the ideas of tradition and, you know, the way you should be and all the rest of it, the atom bomb. And he would say these absolutely outrageous things. At the same time, and this is only one beginning of one poem in the collection. I mean, the main poem in the collection is Howl, which is a very powerful poem. largely about a friend of his confined in an insane asylum, Carl Solomon, and extraordinarily moving. So Ginsberg had that quality of turning your head, and it's like a revelation. I can understand how people respond to sacred texts. I mean, there's nothing sacred about Ginsberg in that sense, but it is a revelation. People could think that way. People could read that way. I'm very curious about how my students reacted to it. I read America the first day of class. I did 3 poems about America. One, this one by Ginsberg, and 2 others. And we didn't really have time to talk about it because it was the end of class, but I'll find out from them.
And what about your next book?
Well, the second one is a collection of stories by Grace Paley. And there's a variety of reasons for choosing Grace's stories. I could have chosen any one of the 3 collections of stories: The Little Disturbances of Man, Enormous Changes at the Last Minute, and Later the Same Day. That's the one I chose. You can get a sense of Grace just by the titles. Enormous Changes at the Last Minute, right? I knew Grace well. She died last year. And she's perhaps the most, at once highly rated and yet underrated American writer that I can think of. Partly because she wrote a lot of fiction, but short stories. She also wrote poetry and nonfiction, but she never wrote a novel that I know about anyway. And she had the most perfect ear for dialogue. Grace is little round, curly white hair, and when she read her stories, it just brought you into a whole world. Her main character is called Faith, so it's a sort of play on her, on herself. She was very active in the peace movement, among other things. I knew her because we were both on the board of an anti-war organization that's become a kind of a small foundation on the left called Resist. So I'd see her every month, and sometimes more often. And as a writer, she had this extraordinary sense of people's language and the ability to capture that language in her prose. And dialogue, it seems to me, is a particularly American capability. Something I was talking with someone here yesterday about how good dialogue can be in American films. They can be terrible in other respects. But you think about the American writers like Hemingway, and Hemingway tracing himself back to Mark Twain, who of course was both a performer and a writer. That sense of language in dialect often, but just in the dialogue, and what comes across in that. Grace, I found very difficult to teach to undergraduates. 18, 19, 20-year-olds find it hard. And I tried to figure that out once. And what I think it has a lot to do with is the way in which people speak to each other indirectly. What they're really saying is so often indirect. And she's got it down. She just really has it down.
Should we hear a little of her dialogue?
Yeah.